Welcome to Lyric Lab Poetry, or welcome back if you've been watching other videos in the series. This video is part 1 of 3 dedicated to the sonnet, a sonnet workshop in 3 parts that get started right now. So the first question we want to ask is, what exactly is a sonnet? And the answer is one that has evolved over many hundreds of years, just as the sonnet itself has evolved over many hundreds of years. But in its most basic form, the sonnet is a 14-line poem about love. That is essentially what a sonnet is. And yes, the sonnet may have evolved and changed over many hundreds of years, and here is a contemporary example, an example of the sonnet American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin by Terrence Hayes, a wonderful collection, and you can see on the page single stanza, 14-line stanzas, and another one, Anthony Joseph's collection, Sonnets for Albert, again a brilliant collection of poetry. Does it matter that the poems in these collections differ in their structure slightly to previous versions of the sonnet? Not at all. But we're going to look at 3 main types of sonnet, and we're going to go back in time. If we go back to the 1200s in Italy, it is a man called Giacomo da Lentini who is credited with the development and the invention of the sonnet form. But it was about 100 years after Lentini, during the earlier part of the Italian Renaissance, that a man called Francesco Petrarca, also known as Petrarch, solidified the form by being a master of that form, and therefore that form today bears his name, the earlier type of sonnet known as a Petrarchan sonnet. So what exactly was a Petrarchan sonnet? Well, I want to give you the tools to create your own sonnet and a poetry prompt, and that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to just grab my laptop here, and I want to show you a more contemporary version, a version of the sonnet from the 20th century. So if I just grab my glasses, otherwise you'll be able to see, but I won't. And with a click of a button here, you're going to see exactly what I'm looking at. Here is a sonnet published in 1923 by Edna St. Vincent Millay, a fantastic poet whose work I absolutely adore. She does extraordinary things with the sonnet form. She sometimes mixes different versions of the sonnet to create a kind of hybrid form. But this is a really good example of a Petrarchan sonnet. And the Petrarchan sonnet, I'm going to just start by breaking this sonnet into 2 parts, although it doesn't appear like that on the page. I just want to show you that really the Petrarchan sonnet is a 2-part thing. But let me just start by reading the sonnet out loud. I, being born a woman and distressed by all the needs and notions of my kind, am urged by your propinquity to find your person fair, and feel a certain zest to bear your body's weight upon my breast. So subtly is the fume of life designed to clarify the pulse and cloud the mind, and leave me once again undone, possessed. Think not for this, however, the poor treason of my stout blood against my staggering brain. I shall remember you with love, or season my scorn with pity. Let me make it plain. I find this frenzy insufficient reason for conversation when we meet again. Now, let's just make a quick analysis of the poem that I've just read, and we can break this down line by line. At the beginning of the poem, she's saying, basically, I'm a woman, and I suffer all the things that women have to suffer and put up with in life. And but when you're around, I'm urged by your propinquity, a kind of antiquated word that means your proximity or your closeness, to find your person fair. Essentially, I think you're hot, and I feel a certain zest, a certain kind of lust, to bear your body's weight upon my breast. I think that's just such a kind of daring line, published in 1923, just 3 years after women got the vote, or white women got the vote, I should clarify. And please, American scholars of the Constitution, do put me right on this, but I think it was 1878 that the 19th Amendment, which says that, every person should have the right to vote regardless of gender, but that didn't really come into effect until 1920. And yes, we refer to the Roaring Twenties, but I mean, yeah, women still had to live and labor in a very sort of male-dominated world. So This is a poem about female desire from a female perspective, written by a woman, not a man. It's not some man's version of what female desire might be. But anyway, the poem continues. So subtly is the fume of life designed. So subtle is this, is the trickery that lust causes, that it quickens the pulse, but it clouds the mind. And what actually happens is I'm left in a complete kind of mess. I am utterly possessed. Really, I suppose we could just take that first word of this first 8-line block and the last word, I, and possessed. I am possessed. That's essentially what she's saying here. When you show up, I am possessed. I am lusting. But what she goes on to then explore in the second part of the poem is really interesting. She says, however, and it's interesting that we break this into 2 separate parts. The first 8 lines known as the octave, and the second part, the 6 lines known as the sestet. And in this type of poem, on that 9th line, so the beginning of the sestet, we launch our volta, something known as a volta, which is a turning point in the trajectory of the poem. She's saying, hang on a second, I may have these lusty feelings, but, and she uses the word treason, you know, my blood, my stout blood, my hot blood, my lust has basically betrayed my brain. My brain is kind of staggering around and my judgment is clouded. But I won't remember you with any love. I don't pity you when I think of, of this thought, the fact that I don't love you. Let me make it very clear. I find this frenzy, I find this lustiness, insufficient reason to even talk to you when I see you next time. It's kind of quite an extraordinary poem. If I just scroll down a bit, what I've done here, I want to now address some of the structural elements of the sonnet form. What the poet is doing here is using something known as the iambic line, where every other syllable is stressed. And if I read, apart from the first line here, where she's actually starts with a strong syllable, but then she quickly reverts to this rule of every other syllable being stressed. I, being born a woman and distressed by all the needs and notions. I mean, obviously, you're never going to read it that way, but by arranging the words in this way, you create this kind of ordered pattern of beats in the line. And that's something known as iambic pentameter or pentameter, because there are 5 stressed beats in each line. Now, in your version of a Petrarchan sonnet, you don't need to really stick to this. It's not a hard and fast rule, but give it a go. We want to create this kind of song through language, this rhythmic element. I'm going to scroll down again because what I've done here is, you can see I've highlighted some of the text to show the rhyme scheme. And when I say rhyme scheme, I mean the end words in each line that rhyme with each other. So you can see, and I've written on the right-hand side, A, BBA, BBA, CDC, DCD. So let's go and look at the first 8 lines here. You can see lines 1 and 4 and lines 5 and 8. They all rhyme with each other. So there are 4 words there that have this end rhyme, this rhyme of est, distressed, zest, breast, and possessed. And then we've got the internal rhymes, the 2 lines that come between those A rhymes, kind and find, designed and mind. So we've got 2 sets of 4 words that rhyme with each other, and then another 4 words that rhyme with each other. That's a real challenge in English, and it's one of the reasons that the later Shakespearean sonnet or the English sonnet developed into something else. We'll talk about that in the next video, but let's continue and look at the next part. You can see in the sestet, the word treason rhymes with season and reason. So we've got 3 rhymes there, C, treason, season, and reason. And then we've got 3 other rhymes, brain, plain, and again that rhyme with each other. And this is the second part of the poem that has a different rhyme scheme to the first part. Now, on the far right-hand side here, I've given you an alternative, because CDE is another popular or alternate rhyme scheme for the sestet in the poem. So that essentially is the Petrarchan sonnet and how it's built, how it's constructed with the meter and rhyme scheme. And here's your prompt. You are going to write a Petrarchan sonnet, a modern sonnet, using modern language. Your poem is going to be about a personal, emotional obsession. And what do I mean by that? Well, I suppose the most obvious form of that would be a romantic fixation. It could be a nostalgia that you return to again and again, that you don't want to let go. It could be a grief that you suffer, that you return to many times. And when I say grief, it doesn't have to be in the literal sense of someone having died, although that could be a part of the poem. I mean the kind of grief you feel when you lose someone, when you lose love. And it could also be a poem that this personal, emotional obsession could focus on an object that you perhaps imbue, or the speaker imbues with meaning. Maybe this possession, this object, belonged to someone who's no longer with us, or the love that's over is represented by that thing. And I want you to explore that in the first 8 lines of your poem. And then in the 9th line, the beginning of the sestet, we are going to have a turning point, a volta. This could be, for example, a contradiction. Maybe the speaker, and it's good to think of words that you might start that second part of the poem with. Words like yet, or however, or but. You could introduce a contradiction that actually, despite these 8 lines exploring this personal emotional obsession, you contradict yourself. The speaker contradicts themselves. Yet, is it really the case that this is the way it is? There could be some kind of disillusionment where the speaker is saying, but now when I look back at these things, it's not quite like that. You could even begin that second part of your poem with a question. Is this really still the case? Are these feelings true? Can I trust them? Or it could be that you launch this second part with a new truth, but actually this isn't the way I feel at all, or now I recognize, time has given me the ability to see from a different perspective the things that I once felt. That is your poetry prompt and your Petrarchan sonnet. Do try to adhere to the iambic line in which every second syllable is stressed throughout your poem. You can play around with that, loosen that up a bit. You don't have to strictly adhere to it. And the same goes for the rhyme. The most important thing with the rhyme scheme, and this is such a challenge for any writer, but the word that you use must not be a word that you've chosen just because it rhymes with the other words in that poem that you need to kind of find a rhyme for. It needs to be the word that is absolutely the right word for the poem that also just happens to rhyme. So there's your poetry prompt. Enjoy the exercise, and I'll be back soon with part 2 of this. I'm just waiting for the siren to pass my window. I'll be back soon with part 2 of this sonnet workshop. Thanks for watching.